Judges Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and gatheringmagic.com. Support our show by visiting both websites. Now it's time for Judges Corner with David Green.
Welcome back to Judges Corner. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at a topic a lot of you have been asking about, and that's regeneration. Regeneration is a really old and reused mechanic that seems really intuitive, but it's actually really kind of complicated. There are a lot of weird things about it that it does, and we're going to explain in this episode why regeneration works the way it works, why the things that happen with regeneration happen, and some ways that you can and cannot regenerate from certain events. So let's start things off by defining what regeneration is. Regeneration states that the next time this permanent would be destroyed this turn, instead remove all damage marked on it and tap it. If it's an attacking or blocking creature, remove it from combat. So regeneration is an effect that says, hey, are you going to be destroyed? No, let's replace that event with all of the things I just defined. So one of the first things it does is it replaces all the damage marked on a creature by getting rid of it. Basically, the creature gets full health bars. For example, let's say I have a Trestle Troll. And it has 3 damage marked on it from my opponent's Searing Spear. And they go to Spirit one more time. When they do this, I go and regenerate it. So the question is, how much damage is marked on it after the regeneration effect? So what happens here is, just like I said, all of the damage is going to get removed. So all 6 damage is going to get applied. It would normally be destroyed due to lethal damage, but instead it isn't. It's tapped. All the damage is removed from it, and instead it has a fresh, clean slate of 0 damage marked on it. So damage is already removed, and the next thing we go to do is tap the creature. Think of this as the creature's kind of exhausted, so it's taking a break and tapping out. If the creature's already tapped, no big deal, it's already tapped. If the creature finds a way to untap, great, you could attack with it or even use any tap abilities it might have if it's not sick. And then the last thing we do is we remove it from combat. So this is kind of two-sided. Let's say that the reason we're dying is because of first strike. Well, it's not very fair for us to say, oh, I'm dying, and then turn around and go, haha, now you die. And it's also not fair if the creature has double strike to get hit and get killed and then say, oh no, I'm going to survive, and then the double striker goes, no you're not, and hits you again. So we remove the creature from combat altogether. And a good thing to point out with this is, let's say that the double striker gets blocked, we regenerate, and then it wants to go and deal damage during the normal damage step. It won't because it's considered blocked unless we include things like trample, but we covered that in a previous episode. So we're not going to cover that here. So now that we've gone over exactly the way and why regeneration does what it does, let's take a look at some things that we can't regenerate from. So some things that you can't regenerate from would include effects that exile. For example, Tristani's Judgment. When this effect goes to exile something, it's not destroying it, it's exiling it. So you can't regenerate from that. Also, if you would return a card to a player's hand or their library, maybe through Cyclonic Rift, then you can't regenerate from that as well. It's not destroying the card, it's simply putting it back into a different zone. The next thing you can't regenerate from would be the things that say that you can't be regenerated from. For example, Putrefy. You can't regenerate if you're being destroyed by a Putrefy because Putrefy explicitly states that you can't. Also, anything that would give it 0 toughness, maybe through a morbidly enhanced Tragic Slip, cannot be regenerated from. And this is because the card is being put into the graveyard via state-based actions that simply pick it up and toss it there, and not actually being destroyed. Also, let's say that you have a Liliana and you use its -2 ability to make a player sacrifice a creature. When a creature is being sacrificed, it can't be regenerated because it's not being destroyed, it's being sacrificed. So when you sacrifice a creature, you're not really destroying it, you're just getting rid of it through a different effect. And finally, you can't regenerate from things that are killing you a second time. For example, let's say that your Lotleth Troll survives by regenerating through combat, and then it's being Searing Speared after that. When that happens, you'd have to regenerate it a whole second time. Its previous regeneration effect is not going to save it. So now that we've looked at some things that you can't regenerate from, what are some things that you can? Before we look at this list, it's important to note that anytime you go to regenerate, you need to regenerate before the destruction event. So let's take a look at that list now and go from there. So you can regenerate from any events that would deal damage during combat, such as lethal damage during the Declare Attackers or Blocker step. You can regenerate from effects that would destroy your creatures, such as a Doomblade. You can regenerate from effects that would deal damage via spells or effects, such as a Lightning Bolt. You can regenerate from effects that would try to destroy your non-creature permanents, such as a Disenchant on one of your artifacts. And you can regenerate from any damage that's being dealt with Death Touch. And it's important to note that when you would be dealt damage via Death Touch, you don't have to regenerate twice. You only need to regenerate once because the damage is being dealt as if it were lethal damage. So some questions I get asked often with regeneration would be, does the creature actually die? And the answer is no. Regeneration replaces the destruction event with tap me, remove damage from me, remove me from combat. So if a creature has any enchantments attached to it, equipments, +1/+1 or -1/-1 counters, effects that are affecting it until end of turn, like Giant Growth. or effects that are targeting it, it's still on the battlefield for those effects. It just taps and says, "Don't kill me, bro." Another question that I get asked is, can I regenerate the creature that's long dead? No, we're not going to have another pet cemetery on our hands. Anyways, when a creature is long dead, you can no longer regenerate it. Regeneration protects from the event of destruction. If the creature's already dead, we can't save it, unless you bring it back to life. And finally, a question I get asked often is, can I regenerate multiple times, and how long does regeneration stick around to save my creature? Let's take a look at that one in an example. So let's give you a wacky scenario where we have a Lotleth Troll and 3 untapped swamps. And our opponent goes to get rid of all of our lands with Armageddon. When they do this, we float the mana and use it to regenerate our Lotleth Troll 3 times. Once those regeneration effects have resolved, our opponent also floated their mana and decides they're going to Searing Spear our Lotleth Troll. Well, the Troll's going to regenerate and save itself, because when we regenerate it, we put a regeneration shield on it. Then they go to Searing Spirit one more time. Well, it's going to be regenerated again. And then they play Day of Judgment. Well, that last regeneration shield is going to be used up to save our Lotleth Troll a 3rd time. It's also important to note that those shields only protect our creature until the very next turn. Once the turn is ended, those shields go away. So the last thing I wanted to go over was an example that showcases why cards can't regenerate multiple times off of the single instance of regeneration that's used. For example, let's say I have an Experiment 1 with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It gets shocked and dealt 2 damage, and I think, well, I don't want to regenerate it because it's a 3/3 with 2 damage marked on it. But then, my opponent goes to shock it one more time. Well, I'm kind of in a conundrum here. If I regenerate it, it's going to die from the second shock, because when I remove the 2 +1/+1 counters, it'll tap itself, remove the original 2 damage marked on it, and then get killed by the shock. And if I let the shock resolve and deal it 2 damage, it's too late for me to try to regenerate it. So this reiterates that you need to regenerate your creatures before the damage is dealt, and sometimes there's no way to save your creatures. So hopefully you learned a lot. If you have any questions, make sure to send them to us at judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com or leave a comment below. And until next time, remember, sometimes dead is better.